Ladies and gentlemen, what's going on? My name is Dananu, and I'm the man with black privilege. And with this video here, we're going to be talking about some new breaking news here. And it's going to be on the Disney front here, but I know I mentioned it in past videos. Probably every time I talk about Spider-Man and Marvel and their whole deal that they got going on, but apparently Disney and Sony are in a dispute. They're they're in a pissing competition, as it were. But I don't know all the details, so I'm not gonna sit here and break things down. But basically, what's going on is Disney is in a deal with Sony to have Spider-Man in the MCU, and we all know that. And I guess now it's pushing up on the time where they have to renew that deal or work out some new arrangements for the deal. But apparently, the deal that they had, I don't know if it's Disney that's doesn't want to agree to something or Sony don't want to agree to something. From what I'm hearing, it's on Disney's end, where they, I guess, want more of the profits from the Spider-Man solo movies, versus however much they were getting before for it. And Sony said no, and they're in their right mind to say no. you know, it's they have the movie rights for the character. Essentially, that's why you don't see. That's why people like myself don't like the newer Spider-Man movies, as far as they think they're okay certain things, but for the most part, everything else around the movie, mainly the ensemble cast, the characters that aren't the characters from the comics, the reason why they're like that is because of the deal that they specifically worked out for Spider-Man, and it is incredibly in depth. You know, I'm not going to go into that because that could be a whole video by itself. But basically, what it is, that deal that they hashed out, they're trying to rework and stuff like that, and apparently they can't come to terms. And like I said before, I've mentioned this in previous videos, is that Sony has those movie rights at any time they want. I mean, granted, they probably got to pull some legal shenanigans, but it's their character at the end of the day. Yeah, it's Marvel's character in the comics and everything else, but when it comes to movie rights, they sold that to Sony. So if this deal, let's say, falls through and they can't come to terms, more than likely Spider-Man will be kicked out of the MCU once the previous contract's terms go up. I think they still got one more movie they got to do. So after that movie, it is what it is. They're probably either gonna write Spider-Man out of the MCU and let that be that, and then no more Spidey in the MCU. I think honestly, this makes everybody a lot of money. I think Spider-Man Far From Home hit over $1 billion, and that's the reason why I think Disney's like, hey, look, we put in all this effort to attach this here, and your movie hit over $1 billion. So I think it's just Disney with their hand out, and Sony's like, no, fuck that. This is our character. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's your character, but it's like in name only. Because everybody else a part of the MCU, like his ensemble cast and the rest of, or everybody else outside of, let's say, Peter Parker and let's say Aunt May, they're all MCU. They're not a part of Spider-Man's history. That's why we don't have Mary Jane as Mary Jane in the newer movies. That's why we don't have Aunt May being the older woman. Now she's like the younger MILF character. That's why things are so different with these newer movies, because if they put the characters as they are in the comics, then technically they would be a part of the MCU. So according to the deal, if let's say Sony wanted to pull out of that deal, let's say they made everything 100% comic book accurate with these new movies. If they pull out, like nobody should ever do in life, if they pull out of that deal, then from what I understand, and I'm not a legal expert, but this is just from the information I gathered on the internet here, all of those characters, besides let's say like Spider-Man and Aunt May and maybe like one or two other people, they would all stay with the MCU going forward. So that means Sony can't use them in their movies if they ever wanted to make solo Spider-Man movies again. So that's where it's kind of, that's why everybody was different in the newer movies. So if Marvel and Sony can't come to some kind of agreement, or if they have to rework those terms, or if Disney has to basically, well, Sony said no and put their hand back in their pocket and be like, man, fuck you, and walk off, then it could be one of those situations where if they can't squash this, then like I said, after the next movie, no more Spider-Man in the MCU. Now, like I previously said, this makes a lot of money. You know, Sony's Spider-Man character in the MCU is obviously making them over $1 billion. So it's one of those things where it would be stupid to to stir the pot. Why mess up a winning formula? So honestly, I think this is just a pissing contest between the two companies. You know, just like how Fox and Disney were doing when they were buying them. This is like Disney has their hand out. Sony said no. Now Disney's going to be like, okay, well, they're going to try to rework their contract a little bit. And it's, in all honesty, in Sony's best interest to do so. They don't have to do it. They can just do, fulfill their contract and let that be that, and then start making solo Spider-Man movies again. But the thing with that is their movies aren't good. Look at Venom. Not good. In any shape of the word. I mean, I personally hated that movie, but I know a lot of other people, let's say, liked it. But even then, if you look at it as a functioning movie, whether you liked it or not, as a movie, shit was fucked up. It was garbage. So their solo Spider-Man only works if he's in the MCU. That's just the point of it. Because if let's say if Sony backed out and let's say they was like, okay, we're going to take Tom Holland, we're going to make solo Spider-Man movies, we're going to put him in Venom, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They can't use they can't use none of the characters that Marvel already set up. And his whole story with his character in Civil War, Homecoming, and Far From Home is centered around MCU characters that Sony can't use. No more Tony Stark references. I mean, granted, it can't be that many anyway since he died, but I'm just saying, no more references, no more MILF Aunt May, no more, a lot of that stuff they probably can't use. So that's like 80% of your character that everybody likes now. So you're going to take all of that away and then go back and make a shitty Spider-Man movie. People probably won't like it. You know what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where you're only hurting yourself, at the end of the day, because Disney's going to be fine. This won't affect the MCU in the slightest. Yeah, people won't be happy to see Spider-Man, but they don't need to see Spider-Man. It's like, yeah, it's great to have, but if they killed it in the next movie and let's say written him out, they could be like, oh, well, Spider-Man was in the MCU for a few good movies. They all loved it. And that'd be that. The MCU will continue on. They got Doctor Strange, Black Panther, all of these other characters that they built up to continue their universe. Sony is like, okay, well, we just got Spider-Man and Venom. And Venom's kind of like, So that's what I'm saying. It's if Sony pulled out, it would be bad, or it would be worse on them. Yeah, they can make a new movie. Yeah, people may catch on, but then again, they may not. And that's the sad part about it is, I know I mentioned it, ever since they signed that deal with Spider-Man, I was like, they can take their ball and go home anytime they want. But it is what it is, man. Honestly, I like Tom Holland as Spider-Man. Like I said, I hate his ensemble cast. I hate the race swapped, characters and everything in his movies and stuff like that, and people who are called MJ, but they're not Mary Jane. But after hearing all the legalese that went on with that contract and that deal, it makes sense. Now I understand why everything is different, because they can't keep it the same and have Sony keep the rights to all of those characters. So after I heard that, I was like, okay, well, now it makes sense. Now I'm not as mad. They did what they had to do. Otherwise they wouldn't have Spider-Man, and you have to give him an ensemble cast, to work around him, because he's not on the camera by himself in a movie. So unless you want to just make an Avengers movie with Spider-Man and then just have everybody else be MCU characters. But, they had to do what they had to do in order to make the deal work and in order to make solo movies and everything. So, I mean, it is what it is. I understand it after I listen to that, but yeah, man, I hope they can come to terms with that. I mean, that's the big deal is, I think they're gonna probably have a few different things where they're gonna go back and forth with different prices and arrangements and deals, and I think this would hurt the MCU too a little bit. So I'm not gonna say yeah they'll be fine at the end of the day, but Disney ain't hurting for Spider-Man in any, like Spider-Man, the MCU doesn't need Spider-Man in any way, shape, or form. So, but this would be like a kind of I mean, they would have to write him out essentially. So this would hurt them a little bit, and they would have to decide, do they want to get hurt? Like, is this deal worth, or asking for more money, is it worth them getting hurt right now? Because right now you just got Tony Stark died, you got Captain America kind of written out, so it's like you haven't established your new face for the franchise yet. You know what I'm saying? So I know I said in my last video when I was talking about Endgame and stuff like that, and Spider-Man, that I knew then that they weren't gonna put Spider-Man as the face of the MCU because they can't. Why would you do that to a character you don't control? So they haven't established, let's say, I don't know who's gonna lead the next Avengers team, but they haven't established a new head yet for the MCU. I would assume maybe it's either going to be like Black Panther, Captain Marvel, even though, God, I wish it's not her, but or maybe even one of the newer characters that they come up with later on. But with Spider-Man here, I'm just hoping they come to terms, because I want to see Tom Holland continue as the character. I like him as Spider-Man, even though I don't like his solo movies and his cast. When he's in the MCU movies, I like him as Spider-Man, and I would like to see that continue. But at the end of the day, I mean, if they can't make that happen, they can't make that happen. It is what it is. I guess we'll be going back to shitty Sony Spider-Man movies. And they may even decide to recast Tom Holland. Maybe just do a whole new Spider-Man with a whole new movies. And I mean, I think that'd be like the shittiest thing that they can do. But they would have to reboot the franchise again. And who knows if they're gonna keep Tom Holland after that. It's one of those things where they would have to just make a corporate decision and try to roll with the punches that everybody's gonna be, knocking them down with. But anyways, fellas, that's just my thoughts on the whole situation here. And if you guys want to talk about anything down in the comments below, just notate something down and I'll be sure to read it. My name is Dananu, and I'm the man with the biggest and the most blackest privilege on YouTube. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.